Dear participants, welcome to our presentation about IRPA Task Group on Radiation Protection in Industries Impacted by Norm. To introduce the topic, I would like to start with some pictures of industrial sectors where radiation protection is important due to the presence of natural radionuclides. On the top left is a mining operation for niobium tantalum ores. Next to it is a processing plant for ore concentrates, and on the top right is a drilling platform for oil production. Meanwhile, these industries are well known as norm industries. Less known is that smelting of ores, the use of abrasives with zirconia, or the extraction of drinking water from groundwater are faced with norm too. In the next slide, we have outlined the radiation protection situation in norm industries worldwide. We have listed some important of these industries and sorted them by the number of operations. The ranking is not based on specific research, but provides some orientation. Supplementing the picture with radiation protection expertise, we see that in less widespread industries, such as a highly specialized use of thorium, for instance, radiation protection is much more developed than in widespread sectors, such as smelting of ores. For example, in many cases, it is unknown that the dust produced in smelting processes may cause radiation exposure due to its lead-210 and polonium-210 content. Because dose rate measurement cannot detect both radionuclides, they are frequently neglected as a radiation source. If we start from this assessment, we quickly come to IRPA and, as written on the IRPA webpage, its general aim to promote the worldwide enhancement of professional competence, radiation protection culture, and practice by providing benchmarks of good practice and encourage the application of the highest standards of professional conduct, skills, and knowledge for the benefit of individuals and society. What is the situation in the real world? Where are the gaps between IRPA's aims and the experience of the practitioners? In this slide, we have summarized some experiences that, in our opinion, are typical in the field of norm. As first, radiation hazard is only one of many hazards at an operational site. But if a radioactivity occurs, it leads to cautions and conservative handling to a particularly high extent. If raw materials, wasted products, are classified to be radioactive, then an uncertainty arises whether materials are dangerous. There is frequently confusion between the terms norm, radioactive and nuclear substances, and radioactively contaminated materials are seen differently as well by operators as by customers or consumers. The industry relies on regulators and legal requirements, and it is usually high regulated. But radioactivity adds additional requirements for producers as well as customers. And finally, there are potential trade impediments from these situations. The practical implications resulting from these effects are significant costs for managing radiation risk. These costs are closely related to the perception of radiation, which results in the generation of fear, difficulties regarding access to land for exploration, constraints on mine approval and operation, restrictions of the handover of rehabilitated sites, or even restrictions on lifestyle. There is potential net harm if these decisions are based on overrated radiation risk and underrated other risk. Avoiding such harm requires a balance between demonstrating low doses and an overemphasizing of radiation hazards. When we ask ourselves how we can mitigate the problems, we as a practitioner see the following possibilities. Firstly, the observations and experiences of practitioners should be collected and communicated with regulators and operators. And secondly, practitioners in industries affected by norm with less practical experience in radiation protection need support. These needs meet the aims of IRPA. Therefore, in 2018, during the 5th European IRPA Congress in La Hague, the formation of an IRPA task group, Norm in Industry, was proposed and later confirmed by the Executive Council. At present, the task group has 17 members from 15 countries from all 5 continents. But we are open for new members if they are nominated by the IRPA member societies. The aims of our task group are to increase the awareness of issues related to norm and industry and to develop a common understanding of requirements, good practice and challenges faced by industry practitioners and regulatory bodies. We will develop and promote a library of good practice documents. We hope that we will be able to influence policymakers, regulators, and industry to ensure that controls for norm are commensurate with the actual radiological risk. Furthermore, the task group will identify gaps at a global scale related to ethical foundations of radiation protection in working with norm and stimulate open discussion of such issues. The task group engages with industry and collaborates and coordinates activities with other groups of similar interest in the field of norm, including IEA and the European Norm Association, INA. We promote practical solutions which apply the graded approach to regulation by editing position papers and website information. And finally, we organize workshops, webinars, and similar events for the dissemination of experience and good radiation protection practice. Our activities to date are briefly summarized in this slide. We started with the refinement of the terms of reference and the collection of feedback from our task group members. Then we developed a work plan in response to this task of reference items. And among our first activities were comments on ICRP documents on radion and norm. In 2019-2020, we started collecting information regarding radiation protection in norm-affected industries in different countries. This will be continued in the future. And we prepared and coordinated a workshop at the International Conference on Management of Naturally Occurring Radioactive Materials in Industry, held virtually by the IEA in October 2020. In the following, I would like to say something about this workshop. The theme of this workshop was communicating the radiological risk of norm, and our aims were to look broadly at norm in industry and think about the communication of radiation risk. To discuss various perspectives, the communication with employers, workers, the regulators, and the public, and to consider if improving communication may lead to a more balanced treatment of norm and a more informed discussion. Furthermore, we intended to discuss the graded approach to manage norm, radiological risk, and to find appropriate approaches for regulation. 4 speakers gave short introductions on the different aspects of the team. Analia Canova talked about communication between regulators and companies. Rian van der Westhuizen about communication with companies with norm. Teng Yulin addressed communication with customers or the public, and Nick Chambers spoke about communication between radiation protection experts. The results of this workshop can be summarized as follows. Residue and waste management containing norm was raised and is concerned with one reason being the very large quantities. That is particularly relevant in the context of the circular economy, which could play a growing role in radiation protection regarding norm in future. Communication of risk with the public remains difficult, and practical tools would be useful. The speakers provided some examples, including practical monitoring examples, radiation monitoring experience in schools, and education of and speaking to the community leaders. In many countries, it was noted the regulatory system is binary. This means that if a material exceeds the nominal 1 becquerel per gram level, then it is regulated, and below this level, it is generally out of scope. But due to the natural variability of activity concentrations and statistical uncertainties, work is required to provide better guidance on a more graded approach to regulation. Finally, the issue of international harmonization of regulation was touched on, and it was noted that there are many different approaches used around the world. The IEA plays a central role in developing a harmonized system, but this requires education and consensus. And our task group wants to continue to contribute to this process by identifying problems and challenges in practice and introducing them into the international coordinated process. In summary, we can state the IRPA task group on radiation protection industries affected by norm is open for business. The group consists of excellent, experienced and qualified team members. We are working to promote a graded approach to regulation through understanding the risk, to provide assistance and communication with stakeholders. We hope that we can contribute that practical expertise is utilized in policy setting in future, and radiation risk, in particular those of norm, are perceived in the right perspective. Thank you for attention. We are open for questions.